The emergency alert started at 3 in the morning. Admiral Lisa Carter rolled out of bed when her communicator began screaming. She grabbed it with shaking hands, still half asleep. "What is it?" she asked. "Ma'am, you need to get to command right now," came the voice of Lieutenant Ben Sullivan. "We have a situation." Lisa threw on her uniform and ran to the command center. When she arrived, the room was buzzing with activity. Officers were running between stations, pointing at screens and talking in excited voices. "Report," Lisa said. Ben turned to her with wide eyes. "Admiral, we just received a transmission. It's from the USS Meridian." Lisa felt her heart stop. The Meridian had been missing for 15 years. Everyone assumed it was destroyed somewhere in deep space. The ship had left Earth with 200 crew members on an exploration mission. They were supposed to return after 5 years. "Are you sure?" Lisa asked. "Yes, ma'am. The signal is definitely from Captain Jake Morrison. He's requesting permission to dock at Luna Station." Lisa stared at the main screen. There, floating in space near the edge of their solar system, was a ship. But it didn't look like the Meridian she remembered. The vessel was 3 times larger than before. Its hull seemed to shimmer and change color as she watched. Strange patterns of light moved across its surface like living things. "My God," she whispered. "What happened to them?" The communication officer turned around. "Admiral Captain Morrison is requesting to speak with you directly. Put him through." The screen flickered and Jake Morrison's face appeared. Lisa gasped. The man she remembered had been young, maybe 35 years old. This Jake looked older, but not 15 years older. His hair was silver, and there were scars on his face she had never seen before. But his eyes were different. They seemed to glow with an inner light. "Hello, Lisa," Jake said with a smile. "It's good to see you again." "Jake, where have you been? We thought you were dead. What happened to your ship?" "It's a long story. We need to talk. All of us. I need to speak with Earth's leaders and the Galactic Council." Lisa noticed something strange in his voice. It sounded like multiple people were speaking at once, creating a strange echo effect. "Jake, how many people are on your ship?" "About 3,000. 3,000? But you left with only 200? "I know. We made some friends along the way." Before Lisa could ask more questions, her scanner officer called out, "Admiral, you need to see this. The ship's energy readings are off the charts. They're showing power levels higher than our entire defense grid." Lisa looked at the numbers on her screen. The Meridian was producing more energy than should be possible. Their best ships could barely manage 1/10 of what she was seeing. "Jake, what kind of power source are you using?" "Something new." "Don't worry, it's completely safe. Can we dock at Luna Station?" "I need to run security scans first." "Of course. But Lisa, your scans won't work on us anymore. We exist in multiple dimensions now." Lisa didn't understand what he meant, but she ordered the scans anyway. The results made no sense. The ship appeared solid on some sensors but invisible on others. Heat scanners showed it was room temperature, but energy detectors said it was burning hotter than a star. "This is impossible," Ben said, staring at his instruments. The Meridian began moving toward Luna Station. Lisa watched in amazement as the ship seemed to phase through their defensive barriers without setting off any alarms. It was like the shields didn't even know the ship was there. "How are they doing that?" someone asked. "I don't know," Lisa replied. As the ship got closer, more details became visible. The hull wasn't made of any metal Lisa recognized. It looked like it was carved from crystal, but it bent and flexed like living tissue. Sections of the ship seemed to be transparent, showing rooms inside that were bigger than should fit in the space available. "Admiral," the communication officer said, "I'm getting reports from around the galaxy. Every major government is asking about the ship. Word is spreading fast." Lisa nodded. She could imagine the panic this would cause. A human ship with impossible technology would make everyone nervous. The Corvani Empire considered themselves the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They wouldn't like being shown up by humans. The Meridian reached Luna Station and began docking procedures. Lisa watched as the ship's hull seemed to melt and reform around the docking clamps. It was like watching liquid metal, but controlled by intelligence. "Docking complete," came the report. "Open a channel to the station," Lisa ordered. The screen showed the main docking bay of Luna Station. The airlock opened and people began walking out. Lisa counted them as they appeared. There were humans, but also beings she had never seen before. Some were tall and thin, almost transparent, with skin that looked like starlight. Others appeared to be made of living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting light in impossible ways. A few looked like they might be machines, but they moved with the grace of living creatures, and leading them all was Jake Morrison. He looked around the docking bay and smiled. Then he looked directly at the camera. "Hello, Earth," he said. "We're home." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Something told her that nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity was about to become something completely different. She grabbed her communicator and began making calls. The president needed to know. The Galactic Council needed to know. Everyone needed to know that the Meridian had returned, and it had brought friends. As she watched Jake and his impossible crew walk through Luna Station, Lisa couldn't help but wonder what they had found out there in the dark between the stars. And more importantly, what it had done to them. The emergency alert that had woken her up was just the beginning. She could feel it in her bones. The real emergency was just starting. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching through the thick glass as Jake Morrison's crew continued to exit their ship. She had been counting for 2 hours, and people were still coming out. The numbers didn't make sense. The Meridian was big, but not big enough to hold 3,000 beings. "How is this possible?" she asked Ben Sullivan, who stood beside her with a tablet full of readings that made no sense. "I don't know, Admiral. The ship's interior space appears to be larger than its exterior dimensions. That should be impossible." Lisa watched as more strange beings walked through the docking bay. The tall, transparent ones moved like they were floating instead of walking. Their feet barely touched the ground. The crystal creatures made musical sounds when they moved, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Admiral," a voice called from behind her. Lisa turned to see Dr. Amy Brooks walking toward them, but this wasn't the Amy Brooks she remembered. 15 years ago, Amy had been the Meridian's medical officer. She was a small woman with brown hair and kind eyes. The person walking toward Lisa now looked like Amy, but everything about her was different. Amy's eyes glowed with a soft blue light. When she moved, Lisa could see through her for just a moment, as if she wasn't completely solid. And when Amy smiled, Lisa felt a strange warmth in her mind, like someone had just shared a happy memory with her. "Hello, Lisa," Amy said. "It's wonderful to see you again." "Amy, is that really you?" "Yes, though I'm quite different now." "We all are." Lisa studied Amy's face. "What happened to you out there?" "We learned things. Amazing things. Our minds expanded beyond what we thought was possible for humans." Ben stepped forward with his scanner. "Dr. Brooks, may I take some readings?" Amy laughed, and the sound was like music. "Of course, but your instruments won't understand what they're seeing." Ben ran his scanner over Amy. The device immediately started beeping in confusion. Numbers flashed on the screen that made no sense. According to the readings, Amy existed in 17 different dimensions at the same time. "This can't be right," Ben muttered. "Actually, it is," Amy said. "I can see quantum particles with my eyes now. Watch." Amy reached out her hand toward the wall. Instead of touching it, her hand passed through the metal like it was water. She pulled her hand back and the wall was perfectly intact. "How?" Lisa whispered. "Matter is mostly empty space," Amy explained. "Once you understand how atoms really work, you can move between them. It's like learning a new language." A new voice spoke from the doorway. "Amy, are you showing off again?" Lisa turned to see Rick Hayes, the Meridian's former navigator. Like Amy, he looked similar to how she remembered him, but changed. Rick's hair had turned completely white. and his eyes seemed to hold tiny stars inside them. "Rick," Lisa said. "You look different?" "Yes, we all do. The experience changed us in ways we never expected." Ben pointed his scanner at Rick. The readings were just as confusing as Amy's had been. "Rick, how do you navigate now? Do you still use computers?" Rick smiled. "I don't need computers anymore. I can feel the shape of space itself. Watch." Rick closed his eyes and held out his hands. In the air between his palms, a three-dimensional map appeared. It showed their solar system, but with details no human instrument could detect. "Mars is going to have a small solar storm hit it in 3 hours, Rick said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Jupiter's moon Europa has a pod of space whales swimming under its ice. And there's a Corvani spy ship hiding behind our moon right now." Lisa grabbed her communicator. "Command, do we have any unidentified ships in our system?" "Let me check." "Admiral," came the reply. After a moment, the voice returned. "Admiral, we just found a cloaked Corvani vessel behind the moon. How did you know?" Lisa stared at Rick. "How did you do that?" "Space isn't empty," Rick explained. "It's full of information if you know how to read it. The beings we met taught us how to listen to what the universe is saying." More crew members began arriving in the observation deck. Lisa recognized some faces, but they were all changed. Paul Davis, the former security chief, now seemed to be made partly of shadow. When he moved, darkness moved with him like a living thing. "Paul," Lisa said carefully, "what can you do now?" Paul smiled and reached into his pocket. He pulled out what looked like a simple metal rod. But as Lisa watched, the rod began to change. It stretched and twisted, becoming more complex. Within seconds, Paul was holding a device that looked like advanced technology. "I made this from the metals in my pocket," Paul said. "Iron, copper, a few other elements. Once you understand how atoms want to connect, you can convince them to form whatever you need." He handed the device to Ben. "This is a scanner that can see through dimensions. It should help you understand our ship better." Ben took the device with trembling hands. When he turned it on, holographic displays appeared in the air around them. The displays showed the Meridian, but not as a normal ship. It existed in multiple layers of reality at once. "My God," Ben whispered. "Your ship is bigger on the inside, because most of it exists in other dimensions." "Exactly," Paul said. "We learned that reality has many layers. Most people only see one layer, but there are countless others." Lisa felt overwhelmed. "How many of you can do these things?" "All of us," Amy replied. "Every human who made the journey. The abilities are different for each person, but we've all been changed." "What about the non-humans on your ship? Our friends? They're refugees, mostly. Their worlds were destroyed by wars or disasters. We offered them sanctuary." A new being entered the observation deck. This one looked like it was made of living metal, but it moved with grace and purpose. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through trees. "Greetings, Admiral Carter. I am called Harmonic of Distant Stars. I speak for the architects." Lisa had never heard of the architects. "What are the architects?" "We are an old race. Very old. We built great cities among the stars before your species learned to make fire. But our worlds are gone now, destroyed by those who fear change. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. But we have found hope with your people. Humans have a gift that is very rare in the galaxy. You can adapt and grow in ways most beings cannot. This is why the Ancient Ones chose to teach you." "The Ancient Ones?" Amy stepped forward. "The beings who taught us, Lisa. They're older than any civilization we know. They exist beyond normal space and time, and they've been waiting for a species, like humanity, for a very long time." Lisa felt a chill. "Waiting for us? Why?" "Because the galaxy is about to change," Jake Morrison said as he entered the room, "and someone needs to help guide that change." Lisa turned to face her old colleague. Jake looked tired but determined. In his hand, he carried what looked like a sphere of pure light. "Jake, what is that?" "A gift from our teachers. It contains knowledge that will change everything. But first we need to talk to Earth's leaders. And the Galactic Council. They need to understand what's coming. What's coming? Jake looked out the window at the stars. A convergence, Lisa. All the old rules are about to change, and humanity is going to be at the center of it all. Lisa realized that her life, and the life of everyone in the galaxy, was about to become very different. The crew of the Meridian hadn't just returned home. They had returned as something new, something powerful, something that would change everything. And she wasn't sure if that was wonderful or terrifying. The news about the Meridian spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours of the ship's return, every major government knew that humanity had gained impossible technology. The reactions were swift and predictable. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the war room on Luna Station, watching reports come in from across known space. The Corvani Empire had mobilized their science fleets. The Vortan Confederacy was moving battle groups toward human space. Even smaller governments were making emergency calls to their allies. Admiral, Lieutenant Ben Sullivan said, looking up from his communications station. The Galactic Council is demanding an emergency session. They want Captain Morrison to appear before them within 48 hours. Lisa nodded. She had expected this. The galaxy's power structure was built on everyone knowing their place. The Corvani had the best technology. The Vorthons had the strongest military. Humans were supposed to be the newcomers who stayed quiet and followed orders. "What's our status with Earth Command?" Lisa asked. "President Kate Nelson is flying in from Earth. She'll be here in 6 hours. She's bringing the entire cabinet with her." "Good. We'll need them." The door to the war room opened and Commander Steve Rodriguez walked in. Steve had been Jake Morrison's second in command on the Meridian. Like the others, he had been changed by whatever happened in deep space. Steve's most obvious change was his eyes. They were completely black now, like looking into deep space itself. But when he looked at someone, they felt like he could see everything about them, past and future. "Admiral Carter," Steve said with a slight smile. "I thought you should know that we have visitors." "What kind of visitors?" "The kind that don't announce themselves. There are 17 Corvani ships hiding in the outer system. They think their cloaking technology makes them invisible." Ben checked his scanners. "I'm not picking up anything." "Your instruments can't detect them," Steve explained, "but we can feel them. They're trying to study us from a distance." Lisa felt a chill. The Corvani were famous for their advanced science, but they were also known for taking what they wanted. If they thought human technology was too dangerous, they might try to destroy Earth before humanity could use it. "Are they a threat?" Lisa asked. "Not yet, but they're scared. Fear makes people do stupid things." Before Lisa could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. "This is High Commander Zex Corvani of the Imperial Science Fleet," came a cold voice. "We demand immediate access to the human vessel designated Meridian. Refusal will be considered an act of war against the Corvani Empire." Lisa looked at Steve, who just shrugged. "Should I handle this?" "Go ahead." Steve stepped forward and activated the communication system. "Hi, Commander, this is Commander Rodriguez of the Meridian. Your request is denied. You dare refuse the Corvani Empire?" The alien's voice was filled with rage. "We have 17 ships in your system. Surrender the vessel immediately." Steve smiled, and Lisa felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. When Steve spoke again, his voice carried a power that made everyone in the room step back. "High Commander, you have 16 ships in our system. Your lead vessel, the Dominator, suffered a complete power failure 30 seconds ago. Your crew is currently floating in space, wondering why all their technology stopped working." On the main screen, they could see a massive Corvani warship suddenly become visible. It was tumbling slowly through space, completely dark. Ben's scanners immediately picked up the ship. "Admiral, they're broadcasting a distress signal. Complete systems failure." High Commander Zex Corvani's voice came back, but now it sounded worried instead of angry. "What did you do to our ship?" "Nothing permanent," Steve replied. "I simply asked their computer systems to take a nap. Your crew is safe, but I suggest you reconsider your approach." "This is impossible." Corvani technology cannot be affected by external forces. Your technology is based on the idea that consciousness and matter are separate things, Steve explained patiently. Once you understand that consciousness can directly affect matter, many things become possible. Lisa watched in amazement as the dead Corvani ship suddenly came back to life. Its lights turned on and it stopped tumbling. Your systems are restored, Steve said. But High Commander, I want you to understand something. We could have destroyed all 17 of your ships just as easily. We chose not to because we don't want to be your enemies. The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. When the High Commander spoke again, his voice was much more respectful. Commander Rodriguez, what do you want from us? Nothing. We want to help you just like we want to help everyone else in the galaxy. Help us with what? Steve looked at Lisa, who nodded. It was time to tell them the truth. High Commander, are you familiar with the ancient records of your people? The stories about the dark time when your homeworld was attacked? Those are myths, legends from before we achieved spaceflight. No, they're not. 3,000 years ago, something attacked Corva Prime. Your people barely escaped. The attackers consumed your star system and moved on to other targets. Lisa saw fear creep into the High Commander's voice. How could you know about that? Because we met them, Steve said simply, in the deep dark beyond the galactic rim. They're called the Devourers, and they're coming back. The communication channel fell silent. Lisa could imagine the chaos on the Corvani ships as their commanders tried to process this information. Dr. Amy Brooks entered the war room, floating a few inches above the floor. Her presence filled the room with a sense of calm. Steve, are you frightening the Corvani again? She asked with a gentle smile. Just explaining the situation. Amy stepped forward and spoke into the communication system. High Commander, my name is Dr. Amy Brooks. I was the Meridian's medical officer. I know this is difficult to believe, but everything Commander Rodriguez told you is true. Amy gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air above them. The images showed star systems being consumed by massive dark ships. This is what we found in deep space. The Devourers destroyed thousands of civilizations. They're heading toward our part of the galaxy now. High Commander Zex Corvani's voice was barely a whisper. How long do we have? 4 years? Maybe 5, Amy replied. But there is hope. The beings who taught us how to expand our consciousness survived the last attack. They've been waiting for species that could help them prepare for the Devourer's return. What kind of help? We need to work together, Steve said. All of us. Humans, Corvani, Vorthans, everyone. The old way of thinking, where each species fights for dominance, won't work against the Devourers. They feed on conflict and destruction. Lisa heard new alarms sounding. Ben looked up from his station with wide eyes. Admiral, we have incoming. Ships, Vorthan battle cruisers, 12 of them. The main screen shifted to show the new arrivals. The Vorthan ships were massive and heavily armed. They took positions around Luna Station in a classic attack formation. Attention human forces, came a new voice. This is General Thax Vorthan of the Confederate Fleet. You will surrender the alien vessel and submit to Confederacy authority, Steve sighed. And here I thought the Corvani were impatient. Can you handle 12 ships as easily as you handled one? Lisa asked. Probably, but I'd rather not. Violence just makes everything worse. Steve activated the communication system, again. General Thax Vorthan, this is Commander Rodriguez. I assume you've been listening to our conversation with the Corvani? We have. Your claims about ancient enemies are clearly fabrications designed to make us afraid. Then let me show you something that might change your mind. Steve closed his eyes and held out his hands. The space around Luna Station suddenly filled with images, not holographic projections, but actual three-dimensional scenes that everyone could see through their viewports. The images showed the Vorthan homeworld as it existed thousands of years ago. Then they showed massive dark ships arriving and beginning to strip the planet bare. This is the real history of your world, General, Steve said. Your people escaped to colony worlds and rebuilt your civilization, but you forgot where you came from. General Thax Vorthan's voice was shaking. This cannot be real. It is. And unless we work together, it's going to happen again. To all of us. Lisa watched as both the Corvani and Vorthon fleets began, backing away from Luna Station. The display of power had frightened them, but the historical revelations had shaken them to their core. "Hi, Commander General," Amy said gently. "We're not your enemies. We're all facing the same threat. The question is whether we'll face it together or separately." The war room fell quiet as they waited for responses. Lisa realized that the next few moments would determine the future of the galaxy. Would the old enemies become allies, or would fear drive them apart when they needed each other most? 3 days after the confrontation with the alien fleets, Captain Jake Morrison finally agreed to tell the full story. He sat in the main conference room of Luna Station, surrounded by leaders from Earth and representatives from 12 different alien governments. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened to the Meridian during those 15 missing years. President Kate Nelson leaned forward in her chair. "Jake, we need to understand, where did you go? What changed you and your crew?" Jake looked around the room at all the faces watching him. His silver hair seemed to glow under the lights, and his eyes held depths that made people uncomfortable if they looked too long. "It started during our 3rd year in deep space," Jake began. "We were exploring a region beyond the galactic rim, farther than any human had gone before. Our mission was to map new star systems and look for habitable worlds." Dr. Amy Brooks, who was floating in her chair rather than sitting, added, "We were excited. Every day brought new discoveries, new planets, new forms of life, new possibilities for humanity's future. Then we found the barrier," Jake continued. "It wasn't visible to our instruments, but when we tried to cross into a particular region of space, our ship just stopped. Not our engines, not our power systems. The ship itself refused to move forward." High Scientist Vex Corvani, who had joined the meeting by hologram, interrupted. "A force field of some kind?" "No," Jake replied. "Something much stranger. It was like space itself was telling us to wait." Commander Steve Rodriguez stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at the stars. "We spent weeks trying to understand what was happening. Our instruments detected nothing unusual, but none of us could shake the feeling that we were being watched." "Watched by whom?" asked General Thaxvorthan, also participating by hologram. "The Primarchs," Amy said softly, though we didn't know that name yet. Jake nodded. "On the 43rd day they made contact. Not through our communication systems, but directly into our minds. All 200 crew members experienced it at the same time." Admiral Lisa Carter, who had been listening quietly, asked, "What did they say?" "They didn't use words," Jake explained. "They shared images, emotions, concepts that our language can't describe. But the basic message was clear. They had been waiting for us." "Waiting for humans specifically?" President Nelson asked. "Waiting for a species with our particular type of consciousness," Steve corrected. "They had been searching the galaxy for thousands of years, looking for minds that could adapt to what they needed to teach." Dr. Amy Brooks gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air above the table. The images showed beings that looked like they were made of pure light, existing in structures that defied normal physics. "The Primarchs exist in multiple dimensions, simultaneously," Amy explained. "They gave up physical form long ago to survive the last Great War. They've been hiding in the spaces between normal reality, waiting for the right species to help them." "Help them do what?" Vex Corvani demanded. "Prepare for the return of the Devourers," Jake said grimly. "The beings that destroyed their civilization, and countless others." The images changed, showing massive ships that seemed to be made of living darkness. These ships were consuming stars, turning entire solar systems into fuel for their war machines. "The Devourers aren't just conquerors," Steve explained. "They're parasites that feed on the life force of entire civilizations. They strip planets bare, consume the energy of stars, and use that power to build bigger fleets." "How do you fight something like that?" General Thaxvorthan asked. "You don't fight them," Amy said. "Fighting them with traditional weapons is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. They turn conflict and destruction into more power for themselves." Jake stood up and moved to the center of the room. The Primarchs taught us a different way. They showed us how to expand our consciousness beyond the normal limits of human thinking. What does that mean exactly? President Nelson asked. It means learning to see reality as it really is, Jake explained. Most beings only perceive a tiny fraction of what actually exists. There are layers upon layers of reality, dimensions, folded inside other dimensions, possibilities that most minds can't even imagine. Steve turned from the window. The training took 12 years. 12 years of learning to let go of everything we thought we knew about how the universe works. It was difficult, Amy added. Many times we wanted to give up and come home. Our minds weren't designed to handle that much information, that much possibility. The holographic images shifted again, showing the crew of the Meridian working alongside, the Primarchs in structures that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. But gradually, we began to understand. Jake continued. We learned that consciousness isn't separate from matter. Thought can directly affect reality if you know how to focus it properly. That's how you can do the things we've seen, Lisa realized. Moving through solid objects, creating energy from nothing, reading information from space itself. Exactly. And more importantly, we learned how to teach others. Vex Corvani leaned forward in his holographic projection. You're saying you can teach these abilities to other species? Yes, but only to those who are ready. The process requires giving up many old beliefs about how reality works. It's not easy for most minds to accept. What about the refugees on your ship? General Thax Vorthan asked. The non-human species we've seen? Steve answered. We encountered them during our final years of training. Their worlds had been attacked by scouts from the Devourer fleet. The Primarchs asked us to rescue as many as we could. These species had already begun the consciousness expansion process on their own, Amy explained. The approaching danger from the Devourers triggered something in their minds, a survival response that opened them to new possibilities. Jake returned to his seat. That's when we realized the truth. The Devourers aren't just coming to destroy civilizations. Their approach actually triggers evolutionary leaps in the species they're about to attack. A defense mechanism? President Nelson asked. More than that. It's like the universe itself is trying to create beings capable of stopping the Devourers. But most species don't have enough time to complete the evolution before they're destroyed. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Vex Corvani spoke. You're saying that humanity and these other species are meant to be weapons against the Devourers? Not weapons, Amy corrected gently. Healers. The Devourers became what they are because they chose the path of consumption and destruction. They can be changed back, but only by beings who have learned to exist in harmony with reality instead of trying to dominate it. How do we know this will work? General Thax Vorthan asked. Steve smiled. Because the Primarchs showed us what happened. The last time someone tried it. Another species, in a different part of the galaxy about 50,000 years ago. The holographic images changed one final time, showing a beautiful blue-green world surrounded by ships of impossible design. The dark ships of the Devourers approached, but instead of attacking, they simply stopped. The Transcended Ones successfully converted an entire Devourer fleet, Jake explained. They turned destroyers into gardeners, parasites into protectors. The converted Devourers spent the next 1,000 years restoring the worlds they had previously destroyed. What happened to the Transcended Ones? Lisa asked. They moved beyond physical existence, like the Primarchs. They're still out there somewhere, watching and waiting. President Nelson stood up slowly. Jake, are you telling us that humanity is supposed to become like them? To give up our physical forms? Only if we choose to, Jake replied. The path has many stages. We're still at the beginning. But yes, eventually those who complete the journey will transcend physical limitations entirely. And if we refuse? If we choose to remain as we are? Jake's expression grew sad. Then we'll face the Devourers with traditional weapons and traditional thinking, and we'll lose just like thousands of other civilizations have lost. Admiral Carter asked the question everyone was thinking. How long do we have to decide? The main Devourer fleet will arrive in 4 years, Steve answered. But their scouts are already in our galaxy. They'll reach the outer systems within 18 months. So we have 18 months to convince the entire galaxy to undergo a fundamental change in consciousness? General Thax Vorthan sounded skeptical. We have 18 months to plant the seeds, Amy corrected. The change itself will happen naturally once beings understand what's possible. Fear of the Devourers will accelerate the process, just like it did for us. Jake stood up again and looked out at the stars. The choice is simple but not easy. Evolve or perish. Transcend or be consumed. Work together or die separately. He turned back to face the room full of leaders. The Primarchs are willing to teach anyone who asks, but they won't force the knowledge on anyone. Free will is sacred to them. Where do we start? President Nelson asked. With volunteers, Jake replied. From every species that's willing to try. We'll take them to the deep dark where the Primarchs wait. Those who complete the training will return to teach others. As the meeting continued, Admiral Carter realized that they were planning the biggest change in galactic history, not through conquest or politics but through evolution itself. Humanity, the newcomers to galactic civilization, were Abe. 6 months had passed since the revelation about the Devourers. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had thought possible. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the observation deck of the new Luna Command Center, watching ships from dozens of different species arriving and departing every day. The changes had started slowly. At first, only a few brave volunteers from each species had agreed to travel to the deep dark for training with the Primarchs. The Corvani had sent their best scientists. The Vorthans had sent their most elite warriors. Even smaller governments had chosen their finest minds to make the journey. But then the scouts arrived. 3 months ago, dark ships had appeared at the edge of the galaxy. They moved slowly, methodically, consuming small asteroids and dead planets to fuel their advance. The sight of actual Devourer vessels had ended all doubts about the threat humanity had described. Admiral, Captain Jake Morrison said as he joined her at the observation window. The morning reports are ready. Lisa turned to look at Jake. He continued to change as the months passed. His silver hair now seemed to move by itself, flowing like liquid metal. His eyes held tiny stars, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made people feel calm and hopeful. How many new volunteers today? Lisa asked. 47 ships. Representatives from 19 different species. The training centers in the deep dark are running at full capacity. Lisa nodded. The transformation of the galaxy was accelerating. Every person who completed the consciousness expansion training returned home able to teach others. The knowledge spread like wildfire, changing entire worlds within weeks. What about the resistance movements? Jake's expression grew sad. Still active. The Hegemony Coalition refuses to believe the Devourer threat is real. They think this is all a human plot to take over the galaxy. The Hegemony Coalition was a group of smaller governments that had always resented the power of the major empires. They saw humanity's new abilities as just another form of domination, no different from Corvani technology or Vorthan military might. Are they still trying to attack our ships? Yes, but they can't hurt us anymore. Their weapons pass right through our vessels. We exist in too many dimensions for traditional attacks to affect us. Dr. Amy Brooks floated into the observation lounge, her body now semi-transparent and glowing with soft light. She had progressed further along the consciousness expansion path than most humans. Sometimes she existed in multiple locations at once, teaching different groups simultaneously. Lisa, Jake, she said with a warm smile. I have wonderful news from the training centers. What kind of news? Lisa asked. The first Corvani student has achieved dimensional transcendence. High scientist Vex Corvani himself completed the final stage this morning. Jake smiled. How is he handling it? Better than expected. He said that for the first time in his life, he truly understands what science is supposed to accomplish. Not domination over nature, but harmony with it. Lisa watched as a group of mixed ships prepared to depart for the deep dark. Humans, Corvani, Vorthans, and several other species were traveling together as equals. 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been impossible. Amy, how many of our people have reached full transcendence now? About 300 from the original Meridian crew. Another 1,000 from the volunteers who joined us in the deep dark. The number grows every day. Commander Steve Rodriguez materialized next to them. He no longer needed to walk through doors. His consciousness could appear anywhere he focused, his attention. "The afternoon briefing is ready," he announced. "We have updates from all sectors." They moved to the command center, where holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Green dots represented worlds that had accepted the consciousness expansion training. Red dots showed Devourer scout positions. Yellow dots marked worlds that were still undecided. "Report," Lisa said. "The Vorthon Confederacy has officially disbanded their military," Steve began. "General Thax Vorthon completed his training last week. He says that beings who understand true reality don't need weapons. What about their defense against the scouts? They don't need traditional defenses anymore. The transcended Vorthons can simply convince the scout ships to sleep until the main fleet arrives." Amy pointed to another section of the display. "The Corvani Empire has begun dismantling their research facilities. They're converting them into consciousness expansion centers. Vex Corvani believes they can train their entire population within 2 years. "That's faster than we hoped," Jake said with satisfaction. Lisa studied the red dots that showed Devourer positions. "How close are the scouts now?" "The nearest ones will reach inhabited systems in 6 months," Steve replied. "But we're ready for them." "Define ready." Jake stepped forward and gestured at the display. The view changed to show the deep dark, where thousands of ships from hundreds of species work together in perfect harmony. "We now have 18 fully operational training centers," Jake explained. "Each one can handle 1,000 students at a time. More importantly, we have over 10,000 fully transcended beings ready to confront the Devourers." "Will that be enough?" "More than enough. The Primarchs estimate that 100 transcended minds working together can convert an entire Devourer fleet. We have 100 times that number." Amy's expression grew thoughtful. "The real question isn't whether we can stop the Devourers. It's what happens afterward." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "Once the Devourers are converted back to their original nature, they'll want to help restore what they destroyed. But that process could take thousands of years. Do we stay to help them? Or do we move on to the next challenge?" Steve smiled. "That's a good problem to have." New alarms sounded in the command center. But these weren't warning alarms. They were celebration signals. "What's happening?" Lisa asked. Jake's face lit up with joy. "The first conversion has succeeded. The Devourer scout ship in the Antares system has stopped consuming planets. It's now helping to restore the worlds it damaged." The main display showed images from the Antares system. A massive dark ship that had been stripping a planet bare was now using its power to rebuild the world's ecosystem. Green plants were growing where there had been only ash. "How?" Lisa whispered. "A team of transcended Corvani made contact with the ship's consciousness," Amy explained. "They showed the Devourers what they used to be before fear and hunger consumed them. The ship remembered its original purpose and chose to change." More celebration signals began sounding. Across the galaxy, other scout ships were making the same choice. The conversion process was working better than anyone had dared hope. "This is incredible," Lisa said. "You're actually saving them." "We're all saving each other," Jake corrected. "That's what consciousness expansion really means. Understanding that we're all connected, all part of the same universal story." Over the following weeks, the transformation of the galaxy accelerated beyond all predictions. Entire civilizations chose to abandon their old ways and embrace consciousness expansion. Wars that had lasted for centuries ended overnight, as former enemies discovered they could share thoughts and feelings directly. The Devourer main fleet, when it finally arrived, found a galaxy that welcomed them instead of fighting them. One by one, the massive dark ships chose to remember their original nature. They began using their incredible power to restore destroyed worlds and help new civilizations grow. Lisa found herself promoted to Galactic Coordinator, a position that didn't exist 6 months earlier. Her job was to help coordinate the restoration efforts as former Devourer ships worked alongside transcended beings from hundreds of species. On the first anniversary of the Meridian's return, Lisa stood once again on the observation deck of Luna Station. But now she could see ships that existed in multiple dimensions, beings of pure light working alongside physical creatures, and planets that glowed with renewed life. Jake Morrison appeared beside her, though he spent most of his time now in the deep dark teaching new students. "Any regrets?" he asked. Lisa thought about the question seriously. Humanity had given up its innocence, its simple view of reality. Many humans now existed more in other dimensions than in normal space. Earth itself was becoming a training center for consciousness expansion. But the galaxy was at peace for the first time in recorded history. Entire species that had been extinct were being restored by converted devourer ships. New forms of life were emerging as transcended minds learned to create rather than just discover. "No regrets," Lisa said finally. "This is better than anything we could have imagined." "The Primarchs are proud of humanity," Jake said. "They say we've exceeded even their expectations. We've become teachers of teachers, guides for an entire galaxy." Amy Brooks materialized next to them, now existing as pure consciousness most of the time. "The next phase is beginning," she announced. "We've received contact from another galaxy. They're facing their own devourer crisis." Lisa looked out at the transformed stars and smiled. Humanity had found its true purpose in the universe, not as conquerors or explorers, but as healers and teachers. They had become the species that helped others discover their own infinite potential. The age of conflict was ending. The age of consciousness was just beginning. And at the center of it all, the species that everyone had once considered newcomers to the galactic community had become the architects of. The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark void between star systems. It was bigger than most planets and home to millions of beings from across the galaxy. Today, the Great Council chamber buzzed with excitement and worry. Ambassador Zektar stood at the center of the circular room. His blue skin shimmered under the bright lights as he spoke to representatives from 47 different alien species. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and some were just floating clouds of gas that somehow could think and talk. "Friends of the galaxy," Zektar said, his voice carrying to every corner of the huge room. "We have a problem. For 300 years, the humans have stayed hidden in their small corner of space. They refuse to talk to us. They refuse to trade with us. They refuse to let anyone enter their territory." A Xanthari captain named Jorik slammed his fist on his desk. He looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard with sharp teeth. "Why do we even care about these humans? They only control 12 star systems. We control thousands." Dr. Velmoth, a Thakari scientist with 6 arms and compound eyes, clicked her mandibles nervously. "Because, Captain Jorik, they are the only species in the galaxy that has never been conquered, never been defeated, and never been understood. Every other species has joined the council or been forced to join. The humans just exist." The room fell quiet. Everyone remembered the stories their grandparents told about the early days of galactic expansion. Every species had tried to contact or conquer the humans at least once. All had failed, not because the humans fought back with great armies or superweapons, but because something always went wrong. Ships would malfunction, crews would become sick. Some explorers would return speaking nonsense about lights in their heads and voices that were not their own. "There is more," Zektar continued. 3 days ago, a human ship broke down near Kepler Station. The crew asked for help, which surprised everyone. It was the first time in 50 years that humans had been seen outside their territory. On the main screen, a picture appeared of a man with brown hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with no fancy decorations. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Aurora's Edge. His engine failed while carrying medical supplies to one of their outer colonies. He and his crew are now waiting at Kepler Station for rescue." The alien representatives leaned forward in their seats. Some whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal. "What makes this interesting," Zektar said, "is that Captain Morrison's ship uses technology we do not understand. Our best engineers looked at his broken engine. They could not figure out how it works. The materials are common metals and crystals, but they are put together in ways that should not be possible." Dr. Velmoth raised one of her arms. I have studied the video recordings of Captain Morrison. He speaks our common language perfectly, but his brain patterns are unlike any species we have ever encountered. When he talks, our telepathic species get headaches. When he moves, our energy sensors show readings that make no sense. Captain Jorik laughed, but it sounded forced. You are all afraid of one broken-down human ship? Not afraid, Zektar replied. Curious, Captain Morrison and his crew have been polite and helpful. They answered our questions about their culture and history, but when we asked why humans stay isolated, they just smiled and said we would understand someday. The room grew quiet again. Everyone had heard stories about human politeness. They never threatened anyone. They never showed anger, they just quietly kept everyone away from their space. Yesterday, something else happened, Zektar continued. 2 more human ships arrived at Kepler Station. They came to rescue Captain Morrison. One ship was commanded by Dr. Lisa Parker, a human scientist. The other was led by Commander Rick Hayes, a human military officer. New pictures appeared on the screen. Dr. Parker was a woman with red hair and green eyes. She wore a white coat over her blue uniform. Commander Hayes was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. His uniform was dark green with silver markings. Dr. Parker brought equipment to fix Captain Morrison's engine. Our scientists watched her work. She used tools that looked simple, but they did things our advanced technology cannot do. She repaired metal by touching it with her bare hands. She made broken computer parts work again just by looking at them. That is impossible, said Ambassador Thexara, a being that looked like a walking crystal. No species can manipulate matter with thought alone. Commander Hayes was even more interesting, Zektar said. He carried no weapons, but our security sensors showed him as the most dangerous being on the station. When he walked past our guards, they felt sick and dizzy. Some reported hearing voices in their heads telling them to sleep. The images on the screen changed to show the 3 human ships leaving Kepler Station. They moved in perfect formation, like they were connected by invisible strings. Before they left, Dr. Parker made an offer. She said humans would be willing to share some of their medical knowledge if we promised to stop sending spy ships to their borders. She knew about every secret mission we have sent for the past 50 years. She knew the names of our spies, the types of ships we used, and the routes they took. Captain Jorik's scales turned pale. How could they know about classified military operations? That is what we need to find out, Zektar said. I propose we send an official diplomatic mission to the edge of human space. Not to spy or attack, but to ask for a meeting. If they refuse, at least we will have tried. If they agree, we might finally understand what makes humans so different. The vote was unanimous. Every species wanted to know the truth about humanity. Within hours, a fleet of 6 ships was prepared. Captain Jorik would lead the military escort. Dr. Velmoth would head the scientific team. Representatives from the major galactic powers would handle diplomacy. As the meeting ended, Ambassador Zektar looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans lived their quiet lives in their 12 star systems. Soon, the galaxy would finally learn what secrets they had been keeping for 3 centuries. The expedition fleet departed Nexus Prime the next morning, heading toward the edge of human space. None of them knew they were about to discover something that would change the galaxy forever. The alien fleet moved slowly through space toward the human border. 6 large ships carried the best diplomats, scientists, and soldiers the galaxy had to offer. Captain Jorik stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the stars ahead. His crew checked their weapons and shields every hour, but deep down he wondered if their technology would matter at all. Dr. Velmoth floated in her science lab, studying every scan they took of the region ahead. The space around human territory looked normal, but her instruments picked up strange energy patterns that made no sense. It was like the vacuum of space itself was alive and watching them. Captain, called his communications officer, we are approaching the human border system. Our charts call it Sol 7. Jorik nodded. All ships reduce speed and power down weapons. We come in peace, just like we planned. But before anyone could respond, 3 small ships appeared out of nowhere. They had not been there a second before. No sensors had detected them coming. They just materialized like ghosts becoming solid. The human ships looked old and simple. Their hulls were gray metal with no fancy decorations. They had basic engines and simple weapon ports that seemed almost primitive compared to the alien fleet's advanced technology. Each ship was about the size of a large fighter, tiny compared to the massive alien vessels. "Unknown ships, this is Lieutenant Danny Cooper of the Human Defense Force," came a calm voice over the radio. "You have entered restricted space. Please, state your business and prepare to be escorted back to neutral territory." Captain Jorik activated his own communicator. "This is Captain Jorik of the Galactic Council Fleet. We come seeking peaceful contact with human leadership. We wish to establish diplomatic relations." There was a pause. Then Lieutenant Cooper spoke. Again. "I understand your intentions, Captain Jorik. However, no foreign vessels are permitted in human space without explicit authorization from Earth Command. This authorization has never been granted to any non-human species." Dr. Velmoth watched her scanners with growing confusion. The 3 human ships showed on her screens as barely functional. Their power levels were low, their shields were weak, and their weapons looked like toys. Yet something felt very wrong about the readings. "Lieutenant Cooper," Captain Jorik said, trying to sound reasonable, "we have come a long way for this meeting. Surely we can discuss this matter with your superiors." "I have already contacted my superiors, Captain. Commander Kate Sullivan is on her way with additional ships. In the meantime, I must ask you to power down your weapons and prepare to leave human space." Captain Jorik looked at his tactical officer, a Xanthari warrior named Vextar. "What do our sensors show about their capabilities?" Vextar's scales rippled with confusion. "Sir, their ships appear almost defenseless. Minimal shielding, basic weapons, low power output. Our fleet could destroy all 3 in seconds." "Then why do I feel like we are the ones in danger?" Jorik muttered. Lieutenant Cooper's voice came again. "Captain, I am reading elevated stress levels from your crew. Please try to remain calm. Strong. Emotions can cause problems in this region of space." Dr. Velmoth's compound eyes widened. How could the human know about their crew's emotional state? Her own sensors could not read biological signs through the alien ship's advanced shielding. "Lieutenant Cooper," she said, activating her own communicator. "This is Dr. Velmoth of the Galactic Science Council. May I ask how you are monitoring our crew's condition?" "Hello, Dr. Velmoth. I have read your research papers on xenobiology. Very impressive work." Lieutenant Cooper's voice carried genuine warmth. "As for your question, it is not something I can easily explain. Let me just say that humans are very good at sensing the emotional state of other beings. Before anyone could respond, the human ships began to move. They did not use their engines. They simply glided through space like they were swimming through water instead of vacuum. As they moved, the alien fleet's weapon systems began to shut down one by one. "What is happening?" Captain Jorik shouted to his crew. "Sir, our weapons are powering down on their own. Our shields are dropping to minimum levels. Our engines are reducing power," his tactical officer reported. "I cannot stop it. The systems are not responding to commands." The same thing was happening to all 6 alien ships. Their most advanced technology was simply turning itself off and no one could figure out why. "Do not be alarmed," Lieutenant Cooper said. "Your ships are not damaged. Your systems will return to normal once you move back into neutral space. This is a safety feature of human territory." Dr. Velmoth stared at her instruments in disbelief. "This is impossible. There is no known technology that can remotely disable our systems without some form of signal or weapon beam. We are detecting nothing." 2 more voices joined the conversation. "This is Sergeant Amy Rodriguez and Corporal Steve Johnson. We are Lieutenant Cooper's wingmen. Captain Jorik, we have been monitoring your fleet since you left Nexus Prime. We know you come in peace, but we cannot allow you to enter our space." "You have been watching us for days?" Captain Jorik asked. "How? Our ships have the best stealth and detection systems in the galaxy." "Your technology is very impressive," Corporal Johnson said, "but it works on principles that assume space is empty and lifeless. Human space is neither empty nor lifeless." Before anyone could ask what that meant, more human ships appeared. Not 3 or 4, but dozens. They surrounded the alien fleet in perfect formation. These ships were larger and looked more advanced, but they still seemed simple compared to alien technology. "This is Commander Kate Sullivan," came a new voice, strong and confident. "I apologize for the delay. I was in a meeting with our Xenology department about your arrival." "Commander Sullivan," Dr. Velmoth said, "we came here seeking understanding. Your people have remained isolated for 3 centuries. The galaxy wishes to know why. I understand your curiosity, Doctor, but the reasons for our isolation are not something we can explain in a brief conversation. What you call isolation, we call protection." "Protection for whom?" Captain Jorik asked. "Protection for everyone," Commander Sullivan replied. "Captain, I am going to ask you to return to neutral space. Your crews are beginning to show signs of exposure to human territory. Much longer here, and some of them may become permanently affected." As if to prove her point, several alien crew members on different ships began reporting headaches, dizziness, and strange dreams. Some claimed to hear voices speaking in languages they did not recognize. Others said they could sense the thoughts of their shipmates. "What is happening to us?" Dr. Velmoth whispered. "You are experiencing what every alien species experiences in human space," Commander Sullivan said gently. "Your minds are trying to adapt to an environment they were not designed for. We learned long ago that extended exposure can cause lasting psychological changes in non-human species." The alien fleet began moving back toward neutral space, their ships somehow guided by invisible forces. As they crossed back over the border, their weapons and shields came back online. The strange sensations affecting the crews faded away. "Commander Sullivan?" Captain Jorik called as the human ships prepared to leave. "Will your people ever be willing to explain what we experienced today?" "Perhaps someday, Captain. When the galaxy is ready to understand that evolution takes many forms and not all of them are visible to instruments or explainable by science." The human ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the alien fleet alone in neutral space with more questions than answers. Back at Nexus Prime, the alien leaders were angry and confused. The peaceful contact mission had failed, and they still knew nothing about human capabilities. In secret meetings, some species decided they needed a different approach. Commander Crix of the Zenthari Special Forces met with Sindal, a Volani intelligence operative, in a hidden room deep inside the station. Both were experts at sneaking into places where they did not belong. "The humans are hiding something important," Crix said, his reptilian eyes glowing in the dim light. "My government wants to know what it is." Sindal nodded, her shape-shifting abilities allowing her to look like any species she chose. "My people agree. We have developed new stealth technology that even human sensors cannot detect. We will find out their secrets." 3 days later, a small, invisible ship crossed into human space. It used technology that bent light around itself, making it completely unseen. The ship's engines were silent and its hull absorbed all forms of scanning beams. By all rights, it should have been undetectable. Commander Crix piloted the ship while Sindal monitored their surroundings. 2 other operatives, a Thakari named Kixtel and a Borvani called Merdok, prepared their recording equipment. They planned to observe a human colony world and finally learn the truth. "Target acquired," Crix whispered into his communicator. Human colony world designated New Texas by their own charts. Population approximately 50,000. No orbital defenses visible. Iuliao. Planet looked normal from space. It had blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds. Cities dotted the surface, connected by roads and transportation systems. Everything seemed peaceful and ordinary. "Beginning descent," Crix reported. "All stealth systems functioning perfectly. No indication we have been detected." They landed in a forest outside the main city and activated their personal cloaking devices. The 4 spies became invisible to all known forms of detection. They had used this technology to infiltrate dozens of species without ever being caught. The city of New Texas looked like something from an old Earth picture book. Houses had white fences and green lawns. Children played in parks while adults went about their daily business. Markets sold food and clothes just like any normal civilization. But as the spies watched more closely, they began to see things that made no sense. A farmer named Bill Turner was working in his fields, but he was not using any machines. He pointed at the soil and it began to turn itself over, preparing for planting. He gestured at seeds and they flew through the air, planting themselves in perfect rows. Water rose from a nearby well without any pumps and spread across the field, in a gentle rain. "Are you recording this?" Crix whispered to his team. "Yes, but the instruments show nothing unusual," Kixtel replied. "According to our scanners, the farmer is just standing in an empty field doing nothing. In town, a teacher named Mary Collins was working with a group of children in a schoolyard. The children were playing a game that involved making small rocks float in the air. They laughed as they moved the stones around each other in complex patterns like a dance performed in mid-air. The children are manipulating matter with their minds," Sindal reported. "But our sensors detect no energy, signatures, no technology, no explanation for what we are seeing." An engineer named Tony Martinez was working on a construction project. He needed to move large metal beams into place, but instead of using cranes or machines, he simply looked at them. The beams rose into the air and positioned themselves exactly where they needed to be. Tony smiled and moved on to the next task. "This is impossible," Murdoch muttered. "No species can move objects with thought alone. There must be hidden technology we cannot detect." Old Pete Williams, a man with gray hair and kind eyes, was tending to his garden. The plants around him grew faster as he walked past them. Flowers bloomed and vegetables ripened as if months were passing in minutes. He hummed a quiet song and the plants seemed to sway to the music. The spies followed him, staying invisible and silent. But as they got closer, Pete stopped humming and turned around. "You know, it is not polite to spy on people," he said, looking directly at their invisible forms. "Why do not you come out and introduce yourselves properly?" The four operatives froze in terror. Their cloaking technology was perfect. No known sensors could penetrate it. Yet this old human farmer was staring right at them. "Do not be afraid," Pete said gently. "I am not going to hurt you. But your presence is making the plants nervous. They can sense your confusion and fear." "Impossible," Crix whispered, but his voice carried clearly to Pete's ears. "Not impossible, just different," Pete replied. "You see, humans experience the world in ways that your instruments cannot measure. We feel the life energy in all things. Your cloaking devices hide you from machines, but they cannot hide you from awareness itself." A construction worker named Carlos Lopez approached from down the street. Behind him walked Nancy Adams, an elderly woman who had once been a pilot. They were not running or acting like they were responding to an alarm. They just walked over casually, as if meeting invisible aliens was something that happened every day. "Hello there," Nancy said warmly. "Welcome to New Texas. I apologize for the informal reception, but we do not get many visitors. Are you here on official business or just curious?" "How can you see us?" Sindal asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. "How can you not see yourselves?" Carlos replied with a smile. "You are standing right there, thinking your thoughts, feeling your emotions. You might as well be shouting your presence to anyone who knows how to listen." More humans began to gather around the invisible spies. A woman pushing a baby carriage stopped to watch. Children playing in a nearby park came over to see what was happening. A man walking his dog paused to observe the scene. "Please do not be alarmed," Nancy said. "We mean you no harm, but your stealth technology creates a kind of blindness that is very obvious to human senses. It is like watching someone walk around with their eyes closed, bumping into things they cannot see." "What are you?" Murdoch asked, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. "We are humans," Pete said simply. "We are what we have always been. The question is not what we are, but what you are ready to understand about the nature of consciousness itself." An 8-year-old boy named Bobby Clark ran up to the group. He looked at the invisible aliens with bright, curious eyes and asked, "Why are you hiding? Nobody here is scary. Do you want to see my pet rabbit? His name is Buttons, and he can do tricks." Before anyone could answer, Bobby reached out and touched Sindal's cloaked arm. The moment his small hand made contact, her invisibility flickered and failed. She became visible to everyone around them. "Oops," Bobby said with a giggle. "Sorry about that." Sometimes I forget that other people's toys are fragile. One by one, the other spies became visible as more humans approached them. Their perfect stealth technology, developed over centuries and tested against every known detection method, was completely useless against human perception. I think, Nancy said kindly, it is time we had a proper conversation about why you are really here. Mayor Frank Davis is expecting you for dinner. He has been waiting since you entered our system 3 days ago. Mayor Frank Davis sat behind a simple wooden desk in his office. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. The 4 alien spies sat across from him, no longer invisible, drinking coffee from ceramic mugs. Outside, the window. Children played in the park while their parents watched and smiled. I apologize for the informal capture, Frank said with a warm smile. We knew you were coming long before your ship entered our system. We have been preparing for this conversation for quite some time. Commander Crix shifted uncomfortably in his chair. How did you know? Our stealth technology is perfect. We have used it successfully on hundreds of worlds. Because, Commander, your technology hides you from machines and instruments. It does not hide you from minds that can feel your presence across space. Frank took a sip of his coffee. Every human in this city knew you were here the moment you landed. We felt your curiosity, your fear, and your confusion. Sindal leaned forward. You are saying that humans can read minds? Not exactly, Frank replied. We can sense emotions, intentions, and life energy. When someone approaches with hostile intent, we feel it. When someone is afraid, we know it. When someone is curious, like you four, we can tell from many miles away. Dr. Helen Carter entered the office carrying a thick book and several old photographs. She was a woman in her 40s, with brown hair and kind eyes. She taught history at the local school and served as the town's record keeper. I brought the materials you requested, Frank, she said, setting the items on the desk. The full history of human development over the past 3 centuries. She turned to the alien spies with a gentle smile. I understand you have questions about why we live in isolation. The answer is not simple, but it is important for your species to understand. Helen opened the book to a page filled with old pictures. The images showed humans from 300 years ago. They looked exactly like modern humans, but something in their eyes was different. They looked tired and confused. 3 centuries ago, humans were much like your species, Helen began. We used technology to solve our problems. We built machines to help us work. We relied on instruments to understand the world around us, then something changed. She turned to another page showing newspaper headlines and scientific reports. The words spoke of strange events happening all over Earth. People began reporting that they could sense other people's emotions. Children started moving objects without touching them. Some humans claimed they could see energy patterns around living things. We called it the awakening. Helen continued. Within 50 years, every human on Earth and our early colonies developed what your species would call psychic abilities. We could influence matter with focused thought. We could sense the emotions and intentions of others. We could feel the life energy in plants, animals, and even the planet itself. Kixtel, the Thakari scientist, clicked his mandibles nervously. This is impossible. No species evolves that quickly. Genetic changes take millions of years. You are correct, Helen said. This was not genetic evolution. It was consciousness evolution. Human minds learned to connect directly with the quantum field that underlies all reality. We began to perceive and interact with the universe in ways that your instruments cannot measure. Frank picked up one of the old photographs. It showed a group of humans standing with various alien species. Both groups looked happy and friendly. This picture was taken during our last attempt at normal galactic contact, about 250 years ago. He set down another photograph. This one showed the same aliens, but they looked sick and frightened. Some were holding their heads as if in pain. Others stared into space with empty expressions. This was taken 3 days later, Frank said quietly. The alien visitors had been exposed to human consciousness for too long. Their minds could not handle the constant input of human thoughts and emotions. Some went insane. Others fell into comas. Several died from the psychological trauma. Sindal stared at the pictures in horror. You killed them with your minds? Not intentionally, Helen replied sadly. Humans at that time could not control their abilities. We broadcast our thoughts and emotions constantly. For species that evolved to have private minds, the experience was overwhelming. Imagine if you could suddenly hear the thoughts of everyone around you all the time, whether you wanted to or not. That is why we chose isolation, Frank added. Not because we feared other species, but because we feared harming them. Every time aliens visited human space, they became sick from exposure to our consciousness. We decided it was better to stay separate until we learned to control our abilities. Carlos Lopez knocked on the office door and entered. Behind him came Nancy Adams and Pete Williams. They had been asked to join the meeting as examples of how human abilities worked in daily life. Carlos here is our best example of matter manipulation, Frank said. Carlos, would you show our guests how you work? Carlos picked up a broken pen from Frank's desk. He held it in his palm and focused his attention on it. The pen began to change shape, its plastic flowing like liquid until it became a perfect, miniature sculpture of a bird. Then the plastic hardened again, creating a detailed work of art. I do not use machines or tools, Carlos explained. I simply focus my intention on what I want the material to become. The atoms rearrange themselves according to my will. Nancy stepped forward. I was a pilot for 40 years before I retired. Human ships do not work the way alien ships work. Our engines are guided by the crew's collective consciousness. We do not navigate by instruments alone. We feel our way through space, sensing gravitational fields and energy patterns directly. Pete smiled and gestured toward the window. The plants in my garden grow so well because I share my life energy with them. I can feel their needs and provide what they require. It is not magic or technology. It is simply how humans interact with the living world. But how? Murdoch asked desperately. How can consciousness affect physical matter? Helen opened the book to its final chapter. We spent 2 centuries studying that question. What we learned is that consciousness is not produced by the brain, as most species believe. Consciousness is a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. The brain is simply an antenna that receives and focuses consciousness. Human brains, Frank continued, evolved to be very sensitive antennas. We can receive and transmit consciousness more clearly than most species. This allows us to influence quantum fields directly, which in turn affects physical matter. Your species, Helen said gently, are not wrong to rely on technology. You simply evolved along a different path. You developed tools to extend your physical capabilities. We developed minds to extend our conscious capabilities. Commander Crick sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Finally, he asked, Are we in danger just by being here? Some danger, yes, Frank admitted. Extended exposure to human consciousness can cause permanent changes in alien minds. That is why we must send you back to your people soon. But we wanted you to understand the truth first. The galaxy believes we are hiding superweapons or advanced technology, Nancy said. The reality is much simpler and much more complex. We are hiding our evolution into something your species are not ready to encounter safely. What happens now? Sindal asked. Frank stood up and walked to the window. Below, children played while their parents watched. Everyone looked peaceful and happy, unaware that their very existence was reshaping the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be intelligent life. Now, Frank said, you return to your people with the truth. And perhaps if your species are ready, we can begin to teach others how to develop their own conscious abilities safely. The universe is much stranger and more wonderful than any of us imagined. 3 weeks later, the biggest meeting in galactic history took place aboard Nexus Prime. Representatives from every known species filled the Great Council chamber. At the center of the room sat 4 very different groups of beings. The alien spies who had visited New Texas sat at one table, still recovering from their experience. Commander Crix looked older and more thoughtful than before. Sindal kept staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Both Kixtel and Murdoch had requested extended medical leave to process what they had learned. At another table sat the human delegation. Ambassador Patricia Moore led the group, a woman with silver hair and calm blue eyes. Admiral Kevin Scott sat beside her, a tall man with a gentle manner that seemed odd for a military leader. Dr. Angela Foster completed the human team, a young scientist who specialized in consciousness research. The third table held the galactic leaders who had sent the spy mission. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand reports that seemed impossible. The fourth table was reserved for the medical teams that had examined the returning spies. Ambassador Zektar called the meeting to order. His usual confidence was replaced by obvious nervousness. We have gathered to hear the report of our reconnaissance mission to human space. What they discovered will change how we understand intelligent life in the galaxy. Commander Crick stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was different than before, softer, more thoughtful. Honored delegates, we went to human space expecting to find hidden weapons or secret technology. What we found was much more significant. We found a species that has evolved beyond the physical limitations that define the rest of us. Murmurs filled the chamber. Several representatives demanded immediate explanation. Dr. Velmoth, who had been studying the spy mission reports, activated her communicator. The evidence is overwhelming. Humans possess abilities that operate outside known physical laws. They can manipulate matter through conscious intent. They can sense emotions and thoughts across vast distances. They can affect the operation of our most advanced technology simply by being present. Ambassador Moore stood gracefully. "If I may address the council," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the huge chamber. "Commander Crix and his team have experienced something that took humanity 2 centuries to understand. We have evolved to interact directly with the quantum field that underlies all physical reality." "That is impossible," shouted Ambassador Thexara. "Consciousness cannot affect quantum mechanics," Dr. Foster smiled gently. "With respect, Ambassador, your statement reflects the limitations of current galactic science. Your species developed along technological paths because you believe consciousness is separate from physical reality. Humans learned that consciousness and physics are part of the same unified system." Admiral Scott activated a small device on the table. Immediately, every weapon system in Nexus Prime powered down. Life support continued working, but all military technologies simply stopped functioning. "How did you do that?" demanded Captain Jorik. "I asked the systems to rest," Admiral Scott replied simply. "Most technology responds to conscious intention when approached correctly. Your computers and weapons are not truly separate from the minds that created them." The device was turned off and all systems returned to normal. The demonstration had lasted only 30 seconds, but its implications terrified the alien delegates. "Are you threatening us?" asked a Borvani representative. "Never," Ambassador Moore said firmly. "We are showing you why we maintain isolation. Human consciousness affects alien technology and alien minds in ways that can be harmful. We chose separation to protect you, not to threaten you." Sindal spoke for the first time since returning from New Texas. Her voice was quiet but clear. "During our time on the human world, I began to experience their consciousness directly. I could feel the emotions of humans around me. I could sense the life energy in plants and animals. For 3 days, I lived as humans live every moment of their existence." She paused, struggling with words to describe her experience. "It was beautiful and terrifying. My mind was not designed for such awareness. I nearly lost my sanity from the overwhelming input. The humans helped me limit the experience, but I will never be the same." Dr. Foster nodded sympathetically. "This is why we cannot have normal diplomatic relations. Prolonged exposure to human consciousness causes permanent changes in alien neural patterns. Some species adapt better than others, but all are affected." "What do you propose?" asked Ambassador Zektar. Admiral Scott stood and gestured to a holographic display that appeared above the table. It showed plans for a new type of space station. "We propose limited contact through specially designed facilities," he said. "These stations would be located in neutral space, equipped with consciousness-dampening fields that allow safe interaction between humans and other species. The hologram showed humans working alongside various alien species, but separated by invisible barriers that prevented psychic contact. Additionally, Ambassador Moore continued, we offer training programs for species that wish to develop their own consciousness abilities. The path we took was accidental and dangerous. We can teach others to evolve more safely. A young Thakari scientist named Bel Tar raised her arm. Are you saying that other species can learn these abilities? Dr. Foster smiled warmly. Every intelligent species has the potential for consciousness evolution. You simply evolved to express it through technology, rather than direct mental ability. With proper training, many of you could learn to perceive reality as humans do. What would be the cost of such training? Asked a practical-minded Zenthari delegate. No cost except time and effort, Ambassador Moore replied. Consciousness cannot be bought or sold. It can only be developed through patient practice and understanding. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species feared human abilities and wanted stronger isolation. Others were fascinated and demanded immediate access to consciousness training. A few suggested that humans should suppress their abilities to allow normal galactic contact. Finally, old Ambassador Zektar called for order. We will vote on the human proposal. All in favor of establishing limited contact through protected facilities? The vote was close, but it passed. 31 species voted in favor, 16 voted against. 6 months later, the first human-alien contact station opened at Haven Point, a neutral location between human and galactic space. Captain Jake Morrison, the merchant whose broken ship had started this entire process, became the station's first human trade coordinator. Dr. Angela Foster established the Consciousness Development Institute on the station. Her first students included Sindal, who had volunteered to be a test subject for cross-species consciousness training, and young Beltar, whose scientific curiosity overcame her species' natural caution. The early results were promising. Several alien species showed natural aptitude for basic consciousness awareness. A few even learned to sense emotions in others or influence simple objects through focused thought. But the most significant change was not in abilities gained. It was in understanding achieved. For the first time in galactic history, different species began to comprehend that intelligence could take forms they had never imagined. Commander Crix, now recovered from his experience, served as a liaison between the galactic military and human defense forces. He often stood on the observation deck of Haven Point, watching humans and aliens work together in their protected environments. They were right, he told visiting dignitaries. The galaxy was not ready to understand what humanity had become, but perhaps we are learning. In human space, life continued as it always had. Children played games that involved floating objects and sensing each other's emotions. Adults worked in harmony with their environment, shaping matter through will and intention. The isolation that had lasted 3 centuries was finally beginning to end. But it was ending slowly, carefully, with protection for everyone involved. Because humans had learned the most important lesson of consciousness evolution. That great power required even greater responsibility.